as a national officer. Then she was the capacity building director in the EB of IFMSA-Pakistan, and she bought SRTs and what's not to Pakistan, you name it, and she got it for Pakistan. So we have her on board, and she is a giant and dragon of SCOME too. We welcome Dr. Aqsa Shafiq here. Then we have Ala Ibrahim, who's current liaison officer on medical education for the term 2019-2020. She she has been working in educational system for SCOME for around 6 years. Ala, correct me if I'm not wrong, right. Sorry, and. And then she's also been working in the IT in SCOME international team along with Aqsa Shafiq. She's been struggling. She bought a lot of opportunities in the field of medical education internationally for all the SCOMEdians around the globe. We have our two honorable speakers. Before starting with the webinar, I'm going to play a short video that is an effort of the core team members of this standing committee camp. We will know more about what the SCOME is, what dilemmas are it facing, and what and whys, a lot of what's and whys in SCOME, and how you can participate, and all of that right after this video. Just give me a moment. Always technical nuisances. I'm gonna play the video now. Thank you, Allah. Can you guys see my screen? If yes, anyone can unmute their mic and say that.
Yes, Maha, we can see your
Yes.
screen.
Perfect. Here you go. Enjoy the video. So that was the video. Here we are back. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll start with the webinar now. I will invite our speakers to start the webinar, tell the participants all the details of the SCOME 101, and then we will move to the questions. Speakers, you have the floor.
Okay. So before I give my mic to our esteemed speaker Ala, especially for external collaborations and advocacy in medical education, I would talk about the perspectives of a student today. When we join IFMSA, what we basically focus on is whether this is something we are interested in or not, whether this is something we want to change or not, whether we as students or future physicians will be involved in this or not. And when you are thinking on these lines and you are thinking about such scenarios where you want to use your own personality, your own intellect, or your own self, you think about SCOME, because you, first of all, are a student, and second, a physician to be. When you think of yourself as a student, you want to change the system that you are in. How many of you do answer in the comments? How many of you sit in your lecture theaters and think that this is not how I want to learn things? This could have been done in this particular manner. This would have changed me if it was done in a different way. I could have learned in a way that was engaging, involving, or it could have made me think more. If you have thought on these lines when you were sitting in the lecture theater, that you sat down every single day before this quarantine came in and gave you a relief, you were a student who wanted to change the system. You were a student who didn't agree to the teaching, the methodologies, and the way you were being taught at school. You were a student who wanted to make a difference. But you know what? Why we don't choose SCOME? Why don't we work on medical education? It's because we don't know how. We think as students we cannot. As students we are not involved. And that is true. On the Fletcher's Ladder by Adam Fletcher, we actually, especially in Pakistan and middle income countries, are at the bottom of the ladder, where you are technically, you have zero involvement with your own institute, faculty, and curriculum, as well as administration. They will not involve you for anything that is required for you. So, as a student, when you're thinking all those, who amongst you thought that I will do something tomorrow to change this lecture system? If you somehow, at any point, thought that you would have become a comedian like I did. So basically, when I was young, that means 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was a student, first year student, and I saw these flaws in my system, I started reading about it. I started researching, and I found IFMSA. In finding IFMSA, I found the standing committee that made me feel home, where I could find the solutions, where I could find the answers to the problems, the flaws that I saw and I wanted to change. And this made me become the panda that I am today. And it gave me the answer to why SCOME. So I want you to think, before we move on to the capacity building aspect of SCOME, that whether you have the capacity, you want to explore the capacity, you want to know that you have the capacity to become that panda who would work for the students of this community, for the students of this educational system, for the teachers of this educational system, and tomorrow become a mentor to the teachers who have not been teaching you the way you wanted. And for that, I'll take you on a journey, and I'll be presenting my screen. And discuss about some capacity building aspects of our medical education system. You must be thinking that okay, I can you guys see my screen, Maha, if you can?
Yes, Aksa.
Okay, so you can see my screen. So you think about what in SCOME, right? You think about, just like you saw in the video, it talks about the students, it talks about the history of SCOME, it talks about SCOME being the first ever standing committee of IFMSA. although it was back then named as Standing Committee on Medical Exchange, which technically does not happen in this era even till now, and is still an idea that can be implemented in SCOME. But now you think about what SCOME actually caters to. It caters to you as a student who can provide beneficiary information, knowledge to students who want to have that practical implication of how to teach, how to be a mentor, how to coach a student to find out what is the purpose of learning that you are having today. For example, the dilemmas that you think about in your normal life, which include how, how are you treating a patient? Why are you treating that patient in a certain way? Why are you dealing with that patient in a certain way? The ethical part, the implemented part, and the combination of these two between a patient, a student, and a doctor, all of these. And when you are thinking about these, you think about whether you are trained enough to do that. And yes, the capacity building part of IFMSA in SCOME includes training medical education trainers. This training is a 3 to 4 day workshop which encompasses on certain topics which include advocacy, which include let me show you, which include planning your curriculum, development of your curriculum, assessment, evaluation, how you can teach small groups, how can you teach large groups, the strategies that you can use in educating students, the campaigning, the advocacy, and how you can create a bond, how you can have a development of your education as an interprofession education, the education that you're having, why is it accredited, why does it need to be accredited by WFME, or why does it need to be linked with other external organizations that your education system is actually working with, why is there a need of quality assurance, why is there a need of research in medical education, why do you need to think about ethics, morals, dilemmas that you face in your normal life as a doctor. Things like these will be the ones that make you want to learn about SCOME. Things like these will make you want to work for SCOME. And when you go through training medical education trainers and the advocacy in medical education training, you actually go through many of these topics and you learn about the how, the why, and the what. And this actually makes you a professional who can work for not just the students, but the future physicians as well as the future teachers of this society. The last question then you ask is that what will SCOME do for you? You've been working for SCOME, you've been planning curriculum, you have been assessing, you have been evaluating, you have been teaching, you have been learning, you have been creating educational strategies, you've been trying to advocate, you've been trying to campaign. What does it give you? It gives you the satisfaction that you need, the education that you want others to have as well, the satisfaction that you are a leader and you are the one who can actually create the change in your society, in your medical education system. And being in a place where you can create things, initiate things, and make things opportunities for others is something that every student, teacher, doctor, physician, or anybody wants, especially after coming into medical education. And I guess this completes the circle where we started from. Because if you had not sat in that lecture theater, slept, and woke up to think that this is not what I want, you would not have had the motivation to take that chance at changing, to want to change, to want to make a difference. And then you would not have had the courage to take that knowledge, to take that information, so that you can actually train others after being trained, and to have peer education good enough to make this system worthy. Because the system that we're living in is actually a system that needs you, the youth, to make it worthy and to make it flawless. But SCOME doesn't end here. Capacity building is just one limb, it's just one part of SCOME. And I hand over to Ella for carrying on about external representation and collaborations that we work on in SCOME. And I will stop sharing now. Ala, the floor is yours.
I hope you can hear me well, and I'm also about to share my screen, so please do let me know when you see it. Um, Thank you so much, Aksa, for the introduction that you just gave us, and I think Aksa pointed out a very important point of why student involvement is important, and I will build up on that to speak about how we're involved internationally and also how you can play a role in your educational system wherever you are. Please let me know when you can see my screen so that I can start.
It's up, Ala.
It's up? Terrific. Great. So the Standing Committee of Medical Education has a mission to make sure that students are engaged in the development of their educational processes. Aqsa brought out a very important point that education is not at its prime in many areas in the world. We as students are in the receiving end of the education, and so we know when it's right and when it's wrong. We have a right to have a voice in shaping our education, and this is why a large part of our work in the Standing Committee of Medical Education and in IFMSA is on advocating for improvement of medical education. My name is Ala Dafala, like Maha gladly introduced me, and I'm very happy to be with you here today. I hope that this part of the segment not only allows you to understand how we like operate on an international level, but also how you can benefit from all of that and achieve impact on a local level. I always say that advocacy is of strongest impact at a local level. Yes, you might feel that globally this is where it is of most impact, but believe me, so advocacy is strongest at a local level because this is where change can be implemented and change is perceived. Now, I'm going to try to make this as very simple as possible. However, at any point of this presentation or talk, if you have a question, write it out in the chat box and I will answer. And if something is unclear, please point it out as well. Our agenda will be talking about student advocacy, why and how, and then I will take you over an overview on our main external partners in a global arena, and then I will also talk to you about how we do advocacy on an international level, hoping that you would be inspired to use those tools on a local level. So, to start, I have a first question, or maybe sort of like a reflection. Have you ever been in a situation where, as a class representative, or you know a class representative who's been invited to the faculty board meeting and you were asked to reflect students' opinions or maybe to prepare a convincing speech to advocate for inclusion of research education modules in your curriculum? I know I've been there. I know many students, as part of being in their educational system or class representatives or part of their student unions, are put in critical situations where they need to advocate and basically reflect the opinions of students to improve education. And they always feel some sort of stuck. So I hope if you relate, please let me know in the chat box. And at the end of this session, we would speak about some of your experiences, and we can also open the floor for you to share your situations and how we can improve advocacy. Now, you have to know before I even start the conversation that you are key. I think a large part of the problem is that students do not understand that their values are extremely valuable, and your opinions are extremely valuable. Although I know the system itself does not make you feel like as students we have valuable opinions, but believe me, so we do. And this is a reminder slide that you are as students first beneficiaries in your educational system, and hence your perspectives are key to the development of medical education, not only worldwide, but also in your university. For me, when I started, just like Aksa, I think 6 years ago, and yes, we're pretty old, but it was mainly just a sense of dissatisfaction with how my educational system was set. And I found a way to make a change. And I also found a platform that linked me with millions of students who also want to make a change. And believe me, so it was an inspiring journey. So the question is, why do we need to have advocacy? And maybe I can open this question to you and look at some of the answers in the chat box, or if you want to even unmute yourself and share your experiences. Why do you think we need advocacy? floor is open, and something that I did not say at the beginning is this has to be an interactive session. Yes, Danielle?
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, my name is Tony Kiprono. I'm from Kenya. So why advocacy? So that my voice could be heard. Yes, so that my voice could be heard. Thank you.
Terrific, amazing. So that students' opinions can be heard. I agree with that so much. Does anybody else want to share? I think in the comment section, Amjad Daniel said he can or he wants to. You can unmute yourself and share your experience. I think we can't hear you. You're still on mute.
Actually,
Yeah,
actually, I said I can on that question that you had asked that I can relate, but somehow, if you're asking, like we need to do it to please our own selves to address our own concerns.
Terrific, exactly. And we have a comment from the chat box that says that it's a very important tool that can be used to bring change to the educational system. Now, before I answer why, another question. What is advocacy to you? Because it's always easier to know why we want to do something, and then when we think, what is it exactly? So what is it? What does advocacy mean to you? I'm also very active in the chat box. I can see your comments, and you can also unmute yourself. Yes, no passive listening. What is advocacy to you? To promote
I'm
our
not
rights?
sure. Yes.
Can I go?
Yes,
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
Advocacy is like you are explaining your idea or your thing, the thing which you want with the pros and cons and with other points to the others. Like you want this to be implemented, then why and how and what is the wrongs in the previous implementing thing and what do you want to implement and how this will go and what are the benefits of this thing you are proposing.
Terrific. So already we're finding common themes that we have an opinion, so we have a voice and we want to make it heard, and that's the why. And we're basically in the chat box, I can see people are saying to support, to communicate, to present views from all masses. So we have an even added theme that it has to be a large group of people to make a proper and uniform decision and to work on educational rights. Amazing. So I think overall, we do have the definition, and the textbook definition is the organized efforts to influence the formulation and implementation of educational policies and programs. So the idea is that you have efforts, but they have to be organized because advocacy has to be a planned process that leads to a well understood impact that can be evaluated so that you can continually improve your advocacy process. It's also been defined as pressure authorities, institutions, and other stakeholders, but I definitely do not agree with pressure because I feel pressure has a negative aspect to it. However, these are some of the definitions out there, and it also says to gain access and influence decision-making process. Now, overall, we can agree that advocacy has to be organized, sustained efforts that communicate our opinions and bring about change. And we also said why we need student advocacy. But in this slide, I wanted to reflect more the challenges that we see in our educational system. Looking right now at the situation we have in COVID-19, how many of you are able to continue your education in a sustained manner through online classes? How many of you feel that your education has been interrupted, assessment or examinations have not been carried out in a fair way, certain modules or courses within your curriculum are not as effective as they were? Right now, you're probably in quarantine for 2 to 3 months and there's no follow-up learning or continued learning. And even if there is continued learning on an online platform, you're lacking the full aspect of an educational experience. There's so many problems that education is facing right now because of COVID-19. And I'm very happy that COVID happened. Sorry, I'm not happy that COVID happened. Sorry, world. But especially for me, I mean, COVID destroyed my plans, but I'm happy that COVID showed the different challenges that we have in the educational system And finally, people are beginning to realize that our educational system is not as good enough and maybe is not resilient. While some parts of the world are able to keep up and continue to provide education to their students, so many areas like Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America struggle to ensure that education is paramount. So that, and because of the fact that we are unable to ensure that our voices are there and our voices are integrated in shaping the education that we need to be the doctors that we want to be, student advocacy is very important. I will not focus my presentation on the educational challenges, but mainly why we do it. So this is a diagram that is very commonly used, and before I even go into the diagram, you can put a thumbs up or an eye in the chat box if you've heard about the golden circle of advocacy. Perfect. So to give an understanding, advocacy, like we said, has to be an organized and structured process. There are many ways through which you can actually implement advocacy. However, one of the most simplest and most useful tools is the golden circle. And how does it act? It usually tells us three things. That whenever you want to advocate for something, you have to know three things. Why, how, and what exactly. So why you are calling out for this change, how exactly you want it to be implemented, and what are the steps that you want to take together. And believe me, so this may seem very simple. However, it is very integral, because when we are advocating as students, we're usually stuck in one phase, which is the why phase. We say, oh, our education is bad. Oh, we want this changed. But we never really go into what we can do and how we can do it. My screen is frozen a little, so I want to know if you can hear me. If you can, just please point out. Oh, yes, perfect. You can hear me. Thank you. So a lot of times as students, when we advocate, we're usually stuck in only one element of the circle. We're either saying why we want a certain change. Oh, please, we need this to be added to curriculum. We need this to be added. We need this to be added. But we never say how, and we never say what. And even when saying the why part of advocacy, we don't provide the sufficient evidence. So I want you to put this in mind before we go into depth in advocacy. Whenever you want to advocate for something, answer the three questions. Either why, how, and what exactly we want to do, or what exactly it is we want to do, how and why. And this means that the circle can actually go bi-directional. So you can start from inside out, or you can start from outside in, depending on your preference. I usually prefer to start with the why, because it allows stakeholders to find a common ground with you. Perfect. There's a question, how can we change when no one is ready to hear? And I will answer that question towards the end of my presentation, give some personal perspectives, and also highlight some of the challenges that we face in student advocacy. So stay tuned. Perfect. Now, moving forward, I'm going to summarize quickly the steps that you can take in advocacy in your student organization, if you're part of a local committee, or if you're part of a faculty board, whatever your context is, the same rules and steps apply. Number one, it is very important to identify and analyze the problem. It's not enough to say, I am not happy with the ethics and professionalism module in education. It's not enough to express just your dissatisfaction. You have to identify the roots of the problem and analyze other factors that could be related to the problem. Education is very complex, and not one solution is enough. Also, not one problem is the cause. So whenever you have a comprehensive understanding of the problem, the easier it is to go to step two, which is to formulate a proposal. Whenever we advocate, we forget to have backing evidence or a structured plan. And this is why formulating a proposal with the concrete steps that you want to take to advocacy is important. The third is to analyze the decision-making space. Now, before I came to present this, I had to ask myself, who are the audience I'm expecting? And what exactly can I provide to make sure that they understand me? Whenever you advocate, you need to also do a similar situational analysis. Who are the stakeholders involved in this problem? and how can we involve them in our advocacy. Doing that early on allows you to be proactive in reaching out to those externals. The fourth step is to analyze channels of influence. How can you make your voice heard? So are you going to use social media? Are you going to organize a campaign physically in your university? Are you going to have a student union, a group of signatures? The decision on the channel that you want to use depends on your context, but I have to reinforce something. Before you advocate, you need to have a certain level of awareness, either amongst the student body or amongst the faculty. And you can only have sufficient awareness through campaigning. So this is why advocacy and campaigning usually happen par to par. Now, the fifth step is to do a SWOT analysis. People usually think advocacy is a one-time thing, but believe me so, advocacy has to be a sustained process. And so you need to continuously do an analysis of the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that you are likely to face, and then design advocacy strategies and an activity plan that is suitable to your context. For example, what works for a student in Asia Pacific, for example, in Pakistan or in Sudan, because we have very similar cultures, is not the same thing that would work for a student in the Netherlands or in Canada, for example, where student representation is already a norm. So your context is very important in designing your approaches, and that's why a SWOT analysis is essential. I think I already went through step 6 and step 7, and this remains and finalizes with step 8, which is the need for continuous evaluation. Like I said, advocacy is not a one-time thing. You need to continuously evaluate your progress and improve your strategies to ensure you're achieving your impact. Now, these slides are going to be shared, and I know it's a lot to take, and definitely I cannot in just less than an hour explain what advocacy is. However, I hope to have inspired you to at least go and read more and even attend more capacity building opportunities to develop this. Now, in case you want to read more, and I actually read your question that came to your mind, where do we read more? We have developed a comprehensive advocacy in medical curriculum toolkit. It has the steps from A to Z that can help any student wishing to change a component or an element in their curriculum, including a curriculum assessment tool that you can adapt to share as a survey. It also includes many different types of tools that you might find useful. So I don't want to ruin the surprise. Please go and take a read, and do let us know through Maha or through your communication channels, or even just share it among the students and help promote this. Coming to a bit more of the interesting part, or the global presence of IFMSA, because I know a lot of you might think, yes, at a local level it's a bit difficult. How can we make change? But before we answer those questions, I want to inspire you with some of the examples on a global level. So unless we don't have a question on the previous slides, like on what advocacy is, the steps, the golden circle, I can proceed, but I will give a 10 seconds wait to see if there's any question so far. So if you have a question on the previous slides, please shoot it right now, and I can answer before we proceed. Terrific. I think there's no questions. And so we can go to external relations and our partners. IFMSA has been active since 1951. And over the years, we've developed a global standing as one of the key representative youth organizations. And we represent more than 1.3 million students around the world. Our advocacy and our relations on a global level have improved tremendously. And I'm going to be sharing with you, as I said in the agenda, who our partners are, and then more importantly, how we do our advocacy. So this is a slide to share the brief partners that we work on currently. And I know there are a lot, but they may be some of them that you may know, some of them that you don't. And yes, maybe if you know some of these externals, you can write them in the chat box. If you don't, I'm going to introduce them to you over the coming slides. But these are some of the global partners in education that IFMSA collaborates with to develop education. When coming to representation, you might ask, is IFMSA represented on any important boards? Like, For example, on a local level, students are represented on faculty boards, for example. But on a global level, are we represented? And yes, definitely. I can say it is represented through the LME, which is Liaison Officer for Medical Education Issues, on many, many boards and councils, on the WFME Executive Council, and WFME stands for the World Federation for Medical Education. So this is the federation that oversees the quality assurance and integrity in basic medical education as well as postgraduate medical education. IFMSA has a seat there, and we continuously give input and share our perspectives as students on the Executive Council. IFMSA is also represented on the AME Executive Committee. AME stands for Association for Medical Education in Europe. Don't worry, I have it all explained in future slides, but I just wanted to show you that student opinions are valued in many, many panels, many committees, many international networks, and many youth hubs. And this is not because we, for example, are special, no, but it's because of long sustained efforts. So start to think how you in your different countries can begin to implement sustained efforts that you can start to improve representation in your university or in your country as a whole. Perfect. Now this is the WFME Executive Council. WFME, and you can see over here, this was the previous Liaison Officer for Medical Education Issues, Katerina. Unfortunately, we did not have an executive council yet face-to-face because of COVID. However, you can see that IFMSA sits with many esteemed medical education experts. Over here is the World Federation President. This is the President of the Southeast Asia Pacific Association. And there we have different people. This is Western Pacific Association. And so you can see that all regions are represented. And in more particular sense, IFMSA has an equal standing and an equal voice in this executive council to voice the opinions of students. What work do we do with WFME? So you might wonder how as students we are involved with them. So mainly we do input to the educational standards for accreditation. I don't want to bore you with a lot of details, but one of the main things and one of the opportunities I want to highlight is the WFME internships. WFME offers IFMSA 4 spots per year to recruit interns, and these are student interns who can come to the WFME office for 3 months and support WFME in its activities, as well as learn and how globally medical education is being changed and implemented. Now, if you have not been aware of this opportunity, please write it down in your diary or mark it down and stay tuned to know whenever we open a new cycle for interns. We also attended the WFME World Conference. This was the previous World Conference in 2019. They're held every 3 years, so the next one will be in 2022 and 2025. This was IFMSA Symposium, where we were reflecting the role of students in accreditation, and you can see that we are able to ensure a strong presence of our voice. And I hope that you would be present as well in 2022 or 2025. Now, moving forward, Amy, and a lot of you are more familiar with Amy. I know why, and it's because of Amy's Student Task Force. Now, Amy, in fact, is the Association of Medical Education in Europe. Now, it started as just a regional association, but it grew so big to the point now they operate on an international scale. Amy has an annual conference that discusses diverse medical education concepts with more than 3,600 participants. And this is no joke. It is 3,600 participants from all around the world. So you can imagine the wealth of knowledge and the experience sharing and the networking possible. Amy values opinions of students, and so they offer opportunities to us, one of which is to fully fund 72 students to assist in the coordination of the conference and attend Amy conference free of charge. Now, this is a very huge opportunity because, as you know, conference attending can be a bit overwhelming for students. However, Amy wants to bridge this gap and make sure that there is, to some extent, financial coverage. Of course, we aspire to have 100% coverage for all people, but it also differs from region to region. The calls for Student Task Force usually open in January of every year. This was the picture from last year's Student Task Force in Vienna, Austria. This year it was supposed to happen in Glasgow. However, because of COVID-19, and yes, again, I'm unhappy about COVID, it was turned into a virtual presence or a virtual capacity. However, in 2021, it will happen again, and stay tuned for the calls in January 2020. 2021 and apply please to be part of the student task force. Another way that AMY supports student initiatives is that it does give grants, so financial awards, to students who are implementing projects that develop medical education. So suppose you're working on a project now in your student union to improve a certain course or curriculum or peer education or develop your medical education, then please apply to the student grants and you can win one of the awards and be awarded by AMY with a certificate as well as financial awards to offset your project. There are many other ways that IFMSA represents and works with AMY, and I won't go into the boring details of my day-to-day work. However, you can always ask me, of course, later on. I just want to say that this is ultimate engagement, and it is very feasible to have in different places as well. Finally, this is not the end, of course. We also have a lot of collaborations we're exploring with other organizations like IAPO, the USAID Working Group on Human Resources for Health, WONCA Working Groups and Tough Institutes, and more on that, of course, in the due course. Now, more importantly, and a question you may be asking, how do we do advocacy on an international level? We already know the partners that we have, so we know who, but we are not knowing yet what and why. So IFMSA does advocacy, and how do we prioritize? According to global priorities. So far, IFMSA yearly structures or has a global priorities, and these reflect what the Federation thinks is important in order to align internal and external efforts. So currently in the term 1920, we have global priorities that two of them relate to Standing Committee on Medical Education directly, so global health workforce and social accountability in medical schools, and other two are much, much broader, so access to research and research education and global health education. I'm going to be reflecting to you our progress on these global priorities over the years and even in the current term, and maybe you can be inspired to start working on one of these global priorities in your NMOs. Social accountability. Now, to define, or maybe to have some sort of a pause, who here is familiar with the concept social accountability of medical education or in medical schools? And if you are, maybe write in the chat box or unmute yourself and share with us what you think is social accountability.
May I share?
Yes, of course.
I guess so. By social accountability, we mean that how a medical student is providing a benefit to society around him.
Definitely, I definitely agree. Anybody else want to add to that? Perfect. So to save time, social accountability is, yes, true, not only the medical students, but also the medical school through its education, research, and services, and how they're targeting that to improve community health outcomes. The idea is that medical schools or education in general should be shaped according to community needs and programmed in a way to make sure that our community health outcomes are improved. Now, social accountability is a very important topic, and IFMSA has been one of the strongest proponents for social accountability. In fact, fun fact, one of my first external meetings to attend in 2017 when I was just a national officer was the World Summit on Social Accountability, and IFMSA there was awarded the Charles Bullen Award of, and this goes to people with key contributions to the field of social accountability. After that, we developed a workshop on social accountability, and we strengthened our advocacy by attending regularly the conferences on Towards Unity for Health in 2017 and 2018. This was a picture taken to the liaison officer at that time. Throughout 2020 will now occur in virtual capacity, and I encourage you very much to use and benefit from the period of COVID-19 to attend these conferences in a virtual extent. And if you feel, for example, that you would like to attend, however, registration fees pose a problem, never hesitate to reach out to organizing committee and ask for a fee waiver, especially for virtual conferences. Now, this term, we did, as IFMSA, submit a diverse array of abstracts to be presented for TUF 2020. We were also invited as opening speaker to the AFMC Global Summit that was going to discuss social social accountability in accreditation and excellence of schools. Now, this was a very huge summit, however, again, cancelled because of COVID. But the key message to send is that IFMSA is maintaining important global visibility in these areas. The second part that we work on is global health education. How many of you feel like your education is relevant to your country or context, but not very relevant on a global level? Or how many feel not confident to practice in other countries because they lack an understanding of global health and matters that are health priorities in other countries? I'm pretty sure we all resonate. I feel, for example, in my educational curriculum, we focus so much on infectious diseases, but a lot of other elements that are important in global health are not addressed. And so IFMSA is one of the key advocates for promoting global health education. How do we do that? Mainly through running a huge exchange program and offering exchange opportunities for students to experience global health in different countries. We're also partnering with Scholar RX right now in developing BRICS. And finally, we do try to attend whenever possible CUGH conference, which is the Consortium of Universities for Global Health. We also work a lot on global health workforce, and you know that in order to achieve universal health coverage, we need to have an adequate health workforce. How does that happen? That happens through adequate health education and training. And so we are the future health workforce, and so IFMSA has to be in the forefront of advocacy for youth in decent working conditions and also for adequate health workforce accreditation and regulation. This was the picture from the from the fourth HRH forum held in 2017. They usually held every 3 years. The fifth forum to follow up on WHO's strategy on advancing global health workforce was supposed to happen in 2020, however postponed to 2021. And the key message to send from this is that shaping the health workforce of the future is the task of the health workforce of the future. There can be no discussion about the future of health workforce without the future health workforce, and we are the future health workforce, so we need to be involved in these processes. And I'm happy to say IFMSA is. Finally, we want to talk about access to research and research education. Many places around the world do not have the adequate research education, and IFMSA did a survey in 2018 that assessed the extent to which research education was incorporated in undergraduate medical curriculum, and we did find very amazing results, but not amazing in a positive way, amazing in a negative way, that not a lot of schools had integrated research education, and we had almost less than 40% reporting that they're satisfied with the level of inclusion of research education in their curriculum. Now, as such, IFMSA has been developing the basic research competencies framework to standardize and structure research education and use it to advocate for the incorporation of research education around the world. We also do work with Spark and OpenCon and Open Science and advocating for access to research and many, many more opportunities. Now, these are the 4 global priorities. I'm going to go back because, sorry, this is a lot of information. But yes, these are the 4 global priorities that relate somehow to our work: global health workforce, social accountability, access to research and research education, and global health education. Now, is this the only thing that we advocate for as a federation? Definitely not. We work on a very diverse array of medical education concepts, and we attend other meetings than the ones explained. So we need a formal way to make sure that our voices as medical students are reflected and evidence-based. How do we do that? We do that through policy documents. IFMSA generates policy documents to reflect the stances of its members, and we usually open small working groups, develop our opinions, structure them, reinforce them with basic evidence and advanced evidence, and we do want to communicate our main call to actions. Now, we have here the policy documents that are already existing, and these are the ones that are incorporated or to be proposed, hopefully, for August meeting 2020. And you can see there's a lot of important topics such as interprofessional education and collaborative practice, access to research and research education, accreditation and quality assurance, social accountability, open access. So the idea is, how can you use these policy documents? If you are in an LC, for example, or in a student union, and you're facing trouble or maybe wishing to advocate for student involvement in accreditation and quality assurance, feel free to find on IFMSA's website this policy document, download it, and use it to develop evidence so that you can have effective advocacy on a local level, using and supplementing globally available resources. Now, I hope that this has not been very overwhelming, but this actually does bring me to the end of our presentation today. And my message to you is that no change is too huge to happen, and no effort is so much to implement. A lot of times as students we think, well, they won't listen, well, it will take so many years, and I think this is some of the reasons why students do not involve in education. They think that, well, we can't really make that change, it's too huge, it will take so much time. But what do we want to wait for? Yes, it does take time. Change in education is slow, but the earlier we start, the better, and the stronger our voices, the faster and the further we go. So I hope that this has inspired you with a global perspective of how we do advocacy. And I also managed to share with you a couple of tools that could be useful to you. And now I look forward to your questions. Yes, be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you so much, Aksa, for sharing the materials on the chat. And now I'm open to questions. You can definitely ask, and I will answer the first one, which someone had already posted, that said, how can we as students make sure that they hear, or maybe university professors, etc., do not hear us? And I have maybe 2 to 3 tips. Number one, a large part of not being heard is how you speak and who you are. So before we want to advocate, we need to make sure that we are present in an organized form. So you're either part of a student union, or if you're not, at least you're part of a federation. So having an identity other than just a student is helpful. I'm not saying it's necessary, but it's helpful. Why? Because it does reflect your importance. And it does also reflect that this opinion is not only an opinion of one student, but is actually an opinion of a whole union or a whole body or a whole federation. And so make sure that, one, you do have an affiliation. Number two, how specific is your message? It is very difficult to understand advocacy, of course, because it differs from context to context. But for example, in Sudan, university professors are very, very reluctant to hear to students. They think students do not know enough. And I struggled a lot as local officer and national officer to make sure I was heard until I started to notice subtle changes that we can do. Number one, try to speak from their angle. So, for example, if your medical school is currently doing a process of quality assurance, or they're currently undergoing accreditation, come to them from an angle of benefit instead of criticism. So rather than, we students are not happy about this and this and this and this and this, you should come from an angle of, oh, we noticed an opportunity for improvement in this area and we're very enthusiastic to work with you to implement that change. Believe me, so that attitude in itself could go miles in helping create a very open environment or a supportive environment to student incorporation. Additionally, you can try to look at existing faculty, professors, or people who already appreciate student involvement, and they can also voice in or pitch in for you. So I know it's difficult, however, it is achievable. And yes, I think these are my personal perspectives, like from a personal level. Remember to always have evidence-based stances and to speak in a very concrete way, but also diplomatically. Externals in medical education are usually very, not old per se, but very experts in the field, and so they're reluctant to listen to opinions that they may seem to find irrelevant. But the more we work on ourselves as students, the more we build our capacity, the more we're able to give valuable feedback, and the more our feedback is appreciated, we will be integrated in change as it happens. Now, I hope that was at least inspiring and informative, and I will hand over to Aksa.
Thank you so much, Ala. Before you hand over to Aksa, there are a number of questions that were in the chat box, and we noted them down. After Aksa has to add something with the previous presentation part. After she's done, I'll share the questions on the screen, and it will be for the speakers to answer the questions. So you have the floor.
Much, Maha, and thank you so much, Kala. I would like to give a closure to this presentation, since at the start we started with the motivation that why would we want to become a comedian? Why would we want to become a panda? What would compel us to look into this and want to know more about it? And once we are motivated, what is it in there that we will get? And I guess Allah has completely given it a big picture, and you must be thinking that okay, there's so much in SCOME and I had not known about it. Yes, there is so much in SCOME, the externals, the policy documents, the work that internationally has been done is massive. Its magnitude is so much that if you gain some knowledge from there, if you get capacitated, if you get the knowledge into a structure for your own system, then you can actually start working for it in your own countries. Without the capacity building, without the knowledge, just like Ala also mentioned during her presentation, without the capacity building, without the knowledge, and without the structure in your head about what to do, when to do, why to do, and with whom to do, we as comedians or we as students in our medical education system will keep sitting back and asking questions that how, and how can a student do, how can we even make this change, how can even this happen? So we will even keep thinking about questions, just like one of the questions came up that why aren't we taught this in schools? It's because nobody as a student came up with the idea of incorporating this into their curriculum. And why that nobody came up with this idea is because that nobody did not have the capacity building, the required knowledge for it. And there are many events of capacity building which include the information that Allah has shared, the external partners and their details that Allah has shared, and the policy documents and the topics that they are based on, and the framework that I shared, the topics that it addresses. All of these are discussed over those capacity building events, which include national capacity building events, local capacity building events for a nation, for a country, for a national member organization, the NMO, and international, which include your regional counterparts, whichever region you are from, the regional meetings where you have pre-regional meeting trainings, and the General Assembly, which includes the pre-General Assembly meeting where you have trainings for specific for SCOME, which include two trainings: training medical education trainers, TMED, which makes you a trainer who can go back home and train your students or your peers as a trainer, and advocacy in medical education training. It's a workshop, a 3 or 4 day workshop. It is a full-fledged workshop which works on every single aspect of medical education to strengthen the core, the knowledge that you can have and how to implement it when you go back home as an advocate. So these two are the biggest training SCOME has developed so far, and might come up with new ones, you never know. And these are used internationally on GAs and regional meetings, and nationally on sub-regional trainings, as well as on NGAs, National General Assemblies, and locally every topic that is catered can be taken out, and a training can be created from that. So here is the link that I want to use as a closure, that externals and your policies, your statements, and your advocacy gives you the platform to act on. And capacity building gives you the performance that you can have while you're acting. Hence, SCOME is something that you need to be prepared for, that you need to have sound knowledge on, so that the performance and the act can actually coincide, and you as a student can be successful when you're actually talking with your faculty, your institute, or your administration, or your government. And I hope that makes some sense to you all now. Ji, Allah, you want to say something, I guess?
Yes, I mean, thank you so much, Aksa, for saying that. It is very, very important to ensure capacity building, because even from the perspective of externals and in the external world, education is difficult, like to understand. The educational concepts are not as easy, for example, as, well, yes, we're advocating for climate change. We want less, wait, air pollution, less of, I don't know, gas emissions. It's not that easy. Usually for education, they're deeper concepts. And so the more that you build yourself, the more you understand the deeper concepts, the more that you'll be able to reflect professionally and implement advocacy. And this is important. So I just wanted to thank Aksa for bringing that up and just echo it.
Okay, thank you, Ala, and thank you, Aksa. If you guys give me the permission, I'll begin with the questions that are in the chat box.
Sure.
Okay, so let's see. There are a lot and there are a lot. I'm going to scroll down slowly. Someone says IFMSA is not registered in Pakistan. The policies and proposals of SCOME are not going to be advocated and implemented in Pakistan. Then why SCOME in Pakistan? Such a good question. But Aksa, would you like to take this up as it's all Pakistan?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Kainat, thank you so much for bringing this up. And as far as beginning, or you can say taking the first step for anything comes up, it is about making the right effort in the right direction. When you talk about IFMSA not being registered in Pakistan, it is basically something that is being worked on, and it's just something that is on hold because of COVID this year, and every document that is required is prepared. So it is not relevant to SCOME being implemented in Pakistan, because even if you're registered or not, IFMSA-Pakistan has actually opened new horizons for SCOME. For example, I would like to state the 5 pre-NGAs, 4 or 5 pre-NGAs that have happened in the previous years had consisted the topics basically that have been created in AMET framework, which I showed you earlier as well, from curriculum planning to educational strategies to advocacy and campaigning to accreditation to quality assurance, professionalism, ethics and moral dilemmas. Everything that is encompassed under SCOME has been taught and trained in the pre-NGAs previously. In doing so, and in all the SCOME sessions that we've had previously, we have actually created a workforce, a national workforce that works for SCOME. And I would like to mention that 5 years ago, SCOME was nowhere in Pakistan. And today, when you see, SCOME is one of the biggest standing committees of Pakistan, and many other standing committees which have actually gone down. On the other hand, SCOME has actually taken pace and created medical education enthusiasts in Pakistan. And I would like to mention that because of this, we have achieved the external collaborations with 2 biggest international conferences that happen in Pakistan on a regular basis. That is International Conference on Medical Education, and that is International Conference on Health Professions Education. Both of these conferences gave us the right to have 5 free medical educationists come and present all the students of Pakistan in the medical education conference. And at the ICHPE that happened in UCMD this year, 2019, it gave us the right to us to represent as a panelist as well with all the medical educationists that were sitting on the stage as panelists to give ideas about the medical system of Pakistan. This is the first step, just like I mentioned at the start, that at the Adams Fletcher, we are actually at the base. Many of the countries are at the base. But if you sit down at any General Assembly or any regional meeting, and you have a training with the diversity or the audience that exists there, they tell you that no, they are called to faculty board meetings. Just like I'll ask you, who has ever been called to a faculty board meeting? Whoever sat down with their students to with their teachers to make decisions for their own institutes. To be honest, in Pakistan, we don't get that opportunity. But having that opportunity while you're at a conference, which is an international conference where you have international speakers and the medical educationists of your own country are making important decisions, and you as a student get the chance because of IFMSA, it makes hell of a difference. And this was the product of 5 years effort, continuous effort in IFMSA-Pakistan for SCOME. And I would like to connect the dots now by telling you that it is always baby steps. It is always one step at a time. And it is always that single effort by every individual who's trying to spark that light that turns that fire on. And unless until that individual fire is turned on, we cannot make up an impact big enough to light it for everyone else.
Thank you, Aksa. There's another question. Ala, if you would like to take this up. Africa generally is medical education. Its medical education is the tough word for archaic, and the clinical work is much emphasized. Students end up completing schools without leadership, research skills, so forth. How can we approach such a scenario and incorporate these to medical curricula? I hope we can get the email of the speaker. Okay, if the speakers want to share that. Ala, can you take up this question?
Yes, of course. And before I answer the question, I worked prior to being LME for 2 years in the African region as regional assistant. And it, aside from also existing in an African country, it helped me understand really the struggles towards education development in the region. And you're very true. Much of the education is traditionally traditionally planned and delivered. So we have the important aspects of global health leadership and modernization of education missing. We also have the important new ways of delivery and curriculum equally missing. So you sort of feel like education in the region is stagnant in terms of development, and this itself has to be inspiring enough for us to implement change. Now, to answer your question more specifically, you asked how we can convince our faculty boards or universities regarding this. Now, number one, if you want to insert something into curriculum, the first answer you will get is no. Why is that so? If you go to an educationist and you say, we want to add this into medical curriculum, they literally knee-jerk reflex is no. And that is because curriculum is a very sensitive component. Everything that goes in is at the expense of something going out, because they cannot increase the number of hours, or they cannot increase the number of credit hours assigned to the whole curriculum body. So they're usually very hesitant to make changes in curriculum unless there is concrete evidence. So number one, you need to have concrete evidence. And number two, changes that are subtle. So not adding whole blocks or components, but rather restructuring the way a certain course is delivered, or the smaller elements or modules in a certain course is far much easier. So I always advise that any change in curriculum should be started small. My advice to you in this specific situation is try to start an awareness foundation of the importance of global health leadership, for example. Develop an activity, mobilize students in university regarding this. Have, for example, a global health leadership workshop or training done, and invite your faculty board. A lot of times we want to be involved in their boards, but we do not want to involve them in our work. If they are not involved in our work, they will not see its value and they will not learn to appreciate that. So it's always important to involve them. So after you involve them, you can present a report with a summary of the activity that was held and an evaluated impact of how the students' perspectives, skills improved. And when you submit that report, do not make a grand, for example, call to action and say, well, we want to have this course integrated into curriculum. No, you can say, start small. So for example, you can say, well, notice that the delivery of this course was very helpful and students had positive feedback. We see that it could potentially be included as an elective addition to X and X module. And then when they start having it as an elective addition, slowly, if they get more convinced and appreciate its value, they might integrate it into a certain module in a more sustainable approach. So my idea or the main message I'm trying to send, of course, this could differ, like advocacy differs from context to context, but the main message I want to send, nothing is done in huge chunks, but rather small steps, especially curriculum, and you need to have sufficient evidence. And so before you're able to reflect that evidence, you need to collect it. And so you would need to have a pilot version done in an extracurricular format or activity. So start extracurricular, then go slowly into curricula. And I hope I didn't bore you with that long answer.
I'm sure that was really insightful for the person who asked the question. My next question, okay, Ala, do you want to add something?
Oh no, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself
It's
or mute
fine.
myself.
Okay, so my next question, Aksa, would you like to take this up? How can be an officer, for example, to represent the standing committee on local and international level? And are there any certain things to have in order to be in this position?
Okay, it's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking this, Zahra. Okay, you want to be an officer. This shows that you have interest. And the biggest thing that you need to become a leader or to become someone who would work for any position is motivation. And your motivation for something is determined by the little bit knowledge that you gain about it, and just because that you have interest in it. So something that would help you is the links that you have shared. Maybe if you go through, especially the link where the first IFMSA.org one, you can find out some tidbits about SCOME itself, and you can build your own capacity by going through this site, find out the policy documents IFMSA has worked on, find out what is advocacy in SCOME, and even just skimming through it once, even by just finding out, oh, this is happening, I want to do something about it, I am motivated, I can put my energy into this direction. Even this is enough. Your motivation matters. And I think that answers your question. Anna, do you want to add something here?
No, not quite. I think I completely agree with Aksa on this one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next question, Ala, if you like to take that up. This is a very general, but I think it's a very important question. Someone asked that why are not we taught about this in schools? That why don't the schools think it's so important? Of course, you cannot talk about all the schools in the world because every schools have different policies, like in the countries like Pakistan, let's say, or in the countries like UK, where there is a huge gap. But what would be your point of view on that?
Yes. My point of view again would be, and sorry if it's a bit different, but we also need to appreciate that not all forms of learning happen in medical school, and actually non-formal education is even like found to contribute to personality development more than formal education. So I think rather than also questioning why medical schools are unable to include all this diverse amount of education, we can also ask ourselves why we're not engaging in existing opportunities for non-formal education to develop our skills and personalities. Now, the actual answer to why schools cannot add that is, again, curriculum is a very sensitive block. If everything was to be added, then we would risk having 5 or 6 year med school extend to 7 or 8. So the idea behind medical school or curriculum is to provide a basic level of understanding that ensures a safe functioning of a physician, for example, if it's medical curriculum. And so you would notice the curriculum is usually very basic and structured around competencies or outcomes that are expected to happen. Not everything can be included into curriculum because of its very tight nature and it being time bound, and also because of relevance. Like a lot of things that are relevant in a certain region are not relevant to others. So curriculum sometimes, because of being socially accountable, is also context specific. These are the questions to why this is not included in curriculum. However, my bolder message is, the non-formal education beats formal education every time of the year, and engage yourself in non-formal education opportunities. And this is exactly why IFMSA is here. And IFMSA is a school, by the way, that has graduated a lot of leaders for, I don't know, 70 years close now.
Agree. Okay, so we still have a good 8 minutes to go. So for the participants, if there are still any questions, this is your time to learn from the people who have a lot of experience in work, 3 years, to learn about medical education.
Maha, can I add something, please?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sharing the Yahoo server group for IFMSA here. If you send an empty email on this, you will find out that you can subscribe to this channel, and you can have incoming of emails and the information which would help you apply for opportunities SCOME offers nationally, internationally, or anywhere across the globe, which are being shared on the server.
Okay, thank you, Aksa, for that. I don't think there are any questions. Speakers, if you mind if I ask any questions, because this was such an informative session, and I have okay, the Aksa shared group over here. This is an email. If you want to subscribe for updates or opportunities that are there in SCOME, you send an empty email on the email that is sent in the chat box, and you will be subscribed to the server. There's another question. Ala, if you would like to take that. Seems IFMSA is looking for established members in matters of leadership. How can we overcome this? I don't get the question, but Ala, if you did.
Well, I was going to ask you to explain more. I didn't understand.
We can ask the person who wrote this. Can you keep through? No, can you explain more about what you want to say? You can even unmute your mic if you have to ask. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. My question is, when we are applying for the various opportunities that IFMSA offers, you get that only the people who have an experience, let's say, in serving medical students, are the ones who are prioritized. So the medical student maybe who has no experience will never get to serve across the 5-6 years that he's in school. So maybe you can be able to address that for those students who are not able to be selected. Thank you. I hope it's clear now.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much for this incredible question. And it's one we get a lot, and it's also one to talk about. It takes a lot of time, but I'm going to try to be concise. Opportunities that IFMSA provides usually are very diverse, true. However, we do have selection criteria to balance between experienced as well as new members. The only difficulty, and this is coming from a person who, I don't know, cumulative this year has seen 1,000 plus applications, is that people sometimes struggle with the right way to convey their motivation, especially if they're new members. And so the competition becomes higher, and only a select number of people are chosen. So number one, answer to your question, we always try to incorporate opportunities for new members who do not have substantial experience, but they have to compensate with clear motivation. And so if you're applying to an opportunity and you feel like you are not very well developed in that area, it's only natural. We all started somewhere. However, you need to have a very strong and a very clear motivation. And if I can give few tips, like from motivation writing, we usually give you word restrictions, and it's very, I know, difficult to write a motivation. And coming from a person who used to have a lot of applications rejected, and finally to one who reviews these applications, is When you're writing a motivation letter, everyone knows you are motivated. So avoid repeating and losing words by saying, I am motivated for this, but rather explain again why this is of importance to you, and not only on a personal level, but also on a professional level, and not only on a short-term aspect, but also on a long-term aspect. And so a person who is able to reflect strong motivation and commitment to continue in this field, even if one lacking substantial experience, is more likely to be selected over a person who has motivation but is short, like a short or wavering motivation. I hope my answer made sense and was helpful.
Yes, thank you, Ala. It does, and I hope Kiprono agrees with it too. Um, can you explain more about internship opportunities? Any one of you speakers who would like to take this question? As we're just approaching towards the end.
Yes, I think I can
Okay.
take this one. And mainly, I think this question was inspired when I mentioned WFME internships.
Yeah.
IFMSA has a couple of internships with organizations, and when it's in the field of medical education, we have a current internship with the World Federation of Medical Education. We're looking to find internships in regional associations in Asia Pacific as well as Americas. However, till now, they're not solidified. Now, the WFME offers an opportunity to a medical student to intern in their key office or headquarters in Ferney-Voltaire in France for 3 months, and usually assist with the tasks such as maintaining of the medical education, the World um, Directory of Medical Schools. So it's a medical education database, amongst other tasks. And usually the tasks of interns are very versatile, but a solid understanding of medical education is required, and as well an ability to work independently. However, I do suggest everyone to apply as well. It's a very once in a lifetime opportunity, honestly, because WFME covers the expenses of the intern, and at least you're reimbursed with a certain amount to cover your expenses. And I feel like it's these opportunities that grow and develop your personality as well, and are contributing or part of the non-formal education. I hope this answers her question.
Yes, I think it does. I would like to thank both of our speakers for this informative and full of knowledge session. Thank you for taking out time for this, and thank you, Allah, especially to have joined this webinar. Like, I know that there are a lot of things going on, a lot of deadlines for the TO people, but thank you so much for taking out time and joining us for this opportunity. With that, I would like the speakers to say any two words that they would want to say to the listeners, or any feedback for this, anything from your side. Okay. Okay.
It was funny when we both unmuted.
Yeah.
Unmuted.
Okay.
You can go first.
I'm having a throat moment. So, yes, what I wanted to say, sorry. What I wanted to say actually is you need to believe that you are able to bring out change. And as students, the more that we believe in our efforts, the more that we can actually implement change. And my final message as well is that always stay connected and part of networks, because networks grow you. And through these networks, you can share experiences, and there's a lot of learning from the books, yes, but there's even much, much more learning from the human books, who are people actually. So always engage in networks, and it has been a tremendous pleasure to facilitate this alongside Afsa, and I hope that at least some of the key messages that I shared would have resonated or stuck with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ala. Aksa.
Okay. What I would say is passion speaks for itself. Unless until we have the motivation, we have the efforts required, we make them, we cannot see change. And change doesn't come from the same attitude, same work, same ideas, same impl- things being implemented over and over. So if you want change, if you want something to be different, you have to act. And only you can act because you saw the the flaws, you wanted to change them, and you were the one who wished to be capacitated for it. And in doing so, you have to get into the system. If you don't get into the system, you cannot change the system. To get into the system, work, be passionate, and be the change maker.
Thank you, Aksa. With that, we would like to end our webinar on the medical education here. We have another set of webinars on all the standing committees. Please stay tuned and register to the webinars if you think that you can learn more about other standing committees. So that's a bye from here from the speakers. I would like to thank both of them again for sharing the platform here, and to all the participants who were here listening to them. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Hope to see you at the end for me.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Apart from that, Maha, I would like to add we have a capacity building webinar tomorrow. So if you guys are interested in joining that, and if you haven't already registered for it, feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
Ibrahim, how to
Thank you,
register?
everyone.
Sorry.
How to register for tomorrow's session?
So initially, when we circulated the registration link, it had a drop down option